Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 2. We're in the last discourse, the last mimer, 144. V'Hashem Omer Hamachase Ani Mavram. And we're discussing how the longing of Malchus Lamaila, knows Malchus, the Isha, Eish Hey, as it longs and yearns and thirsts and hungers and all the expressions he used to connect to the higher levels of the divine. So just as is Lamaila, Kamay Kain Tzarech Li is Benefesh Adam Lamata. So too, is it necessary, it needs to be the case in the Nefesh Adam, in the spirit of the human being below, Hatekif Harotze Vatzemoyin, the intensity of the yearning and the thirst to the point of cheles ava, that literally the person is consumed as it is like an illness. But here's, of course, an illness because of the feeling of the lack and wanting to connect. So it's love sickness. That's what it's called, cheles ava, a love that completely consumes the person to the point that it affects him in that fashion. He's aching to connect. Cheles ava betfila and davening with the higher levels of elikus, of godliness. That's where we stopped. The second line, the last paragraph in the page at 1196. Now, before we continue, I was giving this some thought, and I wanted to just share one or two thoughts that came to mind. The only way a person is thirsty and longs for something is when they're lacking it. When a person is sated and feels fulfilled and complete, and they're in their comfort zone in that sense, they don't yearn, they don't lack, they don't seek, they don't search. In essence, the tzimtzum arishin, beginning with the tzimtzum arishin, which was the utter concealment of the divine, as we learned, both its impact on the Eir HaBligvul, that we, meaning the created existence, our consciousness, is not aware and conscious of that divine. That's the one effect. The second effect is on the Eir HaGvul. So that symptom we know, and we've learned at length, because the big question was, how can a post-symptom reality that is predicated and based on its symptom, it can't exist without the symptom. If there was no concealment, there would be no space for independent consciousness and identity. So how could it ever expect, when its entire existence is based on concealment and the tzimtzum, to connect to pre-tzimtzum reality? And the answer was because the tzimtzum is not an airtight end in itself. The purpose of the concealment is to reveal, not to conceal. The only problem is you can't reveal if you don't first have an independent entity, a student, that's able to absorb what the teacher has to say. But the purpose is not to remain there. The purpose is to grow. And furthermore, the Gili before the Tzimtzum was not an end in itself either. Though we learned that its purpose is to reveal Atzmus and not to illuminate the darkness of the Tzimtzum, but the goal of revealing Atzmus is, there's a purpose in that. The purpose is that we should experience that, as we learned at length. So the kavanah in Havaya is that it should go through Elikim, and the kavanah of Elikim is it should reveal Havaya. In the language of the verse, V'yadai tayem v'shavesa levavecha ki Hashem hu Elikim. And in both levels. B'shamayim mal v'aretz betachas. Okay. So in effect, when you think of it that way, in context of it all, the tzimtzum is actually a critical component, not just in allowing us to exist, but also causing us to yearn and to thirst. The tzama and the Rotze is only as a result of the Tzimtzum. Now, even though by nature, the Lifnei Tzimtzum is by nature always seeking to connect to its source, but because there was no concealment there it's about being attached to its source. There was no hefsek, there was no block, there was no impediment. The more concealment there is, the deeper thirst it will create. Basically, the restraint and concealment actually creates a surge of love and connection that can never be created when things are flowing in a regular fashion. Like the example of let's say a dam. The water is flowing, a river, and it flows with a certain speed and intensity. But if you build a dam, what happens? The water begins to build up and build up and build up. It's a mashal from Chassidus, to the point that when it breaks through finally, it's going with such intensity that not only does it break through the dam that held it back, the dam itself becomes part of the flow. That's what Chassidus brings in certain Maimarim. The very stones of the dam become now part of the forward thrust of the intensity. So the thing that concealed it is, number one, built that intensity, and secondly, becomes part of that intensity. So the Tzimtzum in that sense becomes a tremendous catalyst for the human search to connect, which is, of course, when we're in our comfort zones, we usually do not have that type of impetus and drive. And when we're not in our comfort zones, when something is lacking, you're missing something, that's when that deeper strength emerges. Now, obviously, we all pray and hope that it shouldn't be, it should be some form of concealment, but not to the point of what we talk tragedies and traumas that can be devastating. But nevertheless, the very fact that concealment. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because the fact that he's talking the Aveda of Tzoma here, of Tzimoin and Kiloyin and Rotze, is not just translating everything into Aveda, it's the very essence of the theme of Ayin Beis, of the interface between the divine and existence. Because remember, this isn't just a mathematical equation. How do you connect the infinite and the finite? How do you connect godliness and existence, which are so antithetical? And then we find the interfaces that do the connection. The critical component that should never be forgotten, the key X factor, is the human being. If you remember he said, Ubara Adam al Kula, when he spoke in the previous Maimarim, the Zoyar and Rai Mehemna, and Rabbi Yehuda's continuation. I just want to refer to it. Here we go. Okay, where Rabbi Yehuda comes to explain, he says that Anochi Asisi Eretz v'Adam Aleha Bar Asi, but the lashon in the Zohar was, let me just look for a moment. Yeah, I'm going to be there. Ubara Adam al Kula. That is the Adam, that is the key factor that creates the bridge. Because without the human being, Shema, as he discussed, the Pneumius, Milagav, and the bittul that the Adam demonstrates, there's no way back. In other words, take away the human being and our Aveda. Once there's a Tzimtzum and God creates the universe, yes, you'll have beautiful birds and a beautiful sky, beautiful art. You won't have destruction because there won't be a human being with free will to destroy, but you also will have post-Tzimtzum, a beautiful piece of art that the artist created. That's not the kavan. God wasn't just here to create nice art. He wants it to connect with him and the highest levels, to the point of connecting even to him as he's beyond being an artist. And that's where the Adam comes in and the bitl of the Aveda. And that critical component is the Tzimoyin, is the Tzimoyin and the Rotze, which in a sense is where the existing entity that is now independent in its own consciousness seeks and yearns to connect to the higher levels all the way before the Tzimtzum, to save of Kalalman, as he said, and to that which is higher than save of Mamal. So it's more than just the Aveda of the connection, but it's actually the essential theme. Now, what made me think about it was
first of all, just when you think it comes to mind, but something actually, because of Chav Ches Nissen, 30 years, Shabbos, last Shabbos. So you replay in your mind many of the Rebbe's words and talks. And two sikhs that really jump out at me, that are very much this theme, and will be even more so in the next volume, when we get to volume 3, the part that was never delivered orally but written, Ein Oid, where he's going to discuss about Ein Oid, the last 2 words in the pasuk, Ayin. Ein Oid, we didn't get there yet. He just referred to it. So, and there's a sikh of Shmini that's printed in Chelik Yud Zayin. We talked about it briefly here. From last Shabbos, a sikh Shmini, based on Maimorim of the Rebbe in Tafshin Chaf Hei, Pesach, 1965. And the theme there, I'll start with Shmini, is he asked the question that when you ultimately make a dir b'tachtenim, it means the very body of the tachtenim, the very existence of this lowest world, is transformed to be a home for God. But the question is, the real essence of what makes this world a tachtenim is the concealment, the tzimtzum. Oilam eloshen helam. So to say that the helam is b'shvil hagilu is very good. But the helam itself, will that ever be a dira? Since existence is predicated completely on concealment, will the concealment itself be a dira b'tachtenim only, or the concealment only leads to making a dira? So he explains that the very concealment creates the hunger, the thirst, and therefore the helam itself also becomes a dira b'tachtenim, because it itself was the vital component, not just to conceal, to create existence, but also that existence should yearn to connect. And one of the chidushim of the Rebbe, that the concealment itself really is, in essence, revelation, except at this point, it's not seen. It's like when the father conceals himself from the child, it's only to elicit his ingenuity to find the father. But if you don't do that, the concealment becomes an end in itself. That's the root of all problems. So the concealment has 2 parts to it. What you see, which is concealment, which means what you don't see actually, is concealed. But what his purpose is actually to elicit. That's one thing. Then there's the Sikha Shaina Rabba Memdal, Tovsh Memdal, if you were watching the program on Sunday. And there's one of the most emotional Sikhs you'll ever see, the Rebbe standing up on his bima. It was a Shaina Rabba, Sukkot that year, 1983. And the Rebbe was speaking, why? Why are we still in Golus? Ad Maseh. How long? Because it doesn't make any sense that after everything we've gone through and everything we've done, we should still be in Golus. And the Rebbe then, with tears, and you can literally, not just tears, you hear him sobbing. At some points, actually, with the sound, the Rebbe says that the only way to explain it is because the Eibishter wants that we should cry mitanemes, mitanemes. That means we should sincerely, with all our being, really cry out for the Geula. If there would be any explanation of the Maila of Golus, of the quality, if there'd be any explanation, even a glimmer, he says, the Rebbe, even a brek, anything, we wouldn't cry with the truth, because there's a purpose. So the only way a person really cries out is when they see it's completely hopeless in a way, completely dark, with no explanation and no way of understanding, even a drop of light. That's what the Rebbe says. So when I'm thinking about it, and then we're talking here about some Samoyan and Rotzei, that's as a result of Malchus wanting to connect. Of course, all this is due to the Tzimtzum. I mean, the Rebbe is basically saying those words, that the Tzimtzum itself becomes the catalyst. And the total concealment is actually what allows us to become so desperate that we cry out with anemis. And I mean desperate in a way, I don't mean desperate in a negative way. So, and he says there clearly that that we cry out and say that we don't know, it's only completely dependent on God. And we have no way in human intelligence and in our understanding to understand what the reason for it is. In other words, it doesn't say the words the Holocaust, but the very fact
that it's so unfathomable is what causes us to cry out with an emes. If there'd be even one drop of explanation, you could say, okay, I understand why it happened. So it's like turning the big question on its head. Usually that question is what disturbs us all. And the Rebbe is saying that question is actually what causes us to be more connected than ever. Because we have no reason except complete reliance on God, because we have no other way to explain, we have no explanation. That's the only thing that's possible, is our total, our crying out with an emes, as he put it there. Shreim mit an emes. Now, I have to say, where we are now, we're going to be learning soon, not now, and then as we continue into the next volume, that this is still not the ultimate symptom here. This is still Havayu Elikim, meaning recognizing in the concealment the Havaya within it, the divine within the divine, the Sevav within Mamala, as we learned. That recognizing firstly the divine, the finite energy of the divine as it manifests in existence, and as the infinite divine as it manifests within the finite energy. So it's all still in Giluyim. When he's going to come to the end, Ein, I think the Sikh of Eshayin Rabbah and the Sikh of Shmini I just quoted before go into the next category, where it's completely recognizing how the concealment itself is Elikus. Still here, he's not saying the concealment is Elikus. He's saying that within the concealment is Elikus. But he's not talking about the very concealment itself. Here it still is the concealment is in order to reveal. And the revelation before the tzimtzum is in order to be received by us. But still, especially in context, as I said, of these sikhs that I just quoted, it seems that so much of what the Rebbe was saying and crying about the Geula and Mashiach is very relevant, literally, to what we're learning right now. I will cite one more sikh, if I may. I think it's either Asar B'Tevis Mem Aleph or Mem Gimel. Which one was the year? Bikush Yaakov Legalas Saketz. I think it's Mem Gimel. It would be 1983. Okay, the Rebbe asked there the question, Yaakov wanted to reveal the Ketz, when the Geula was going to come to his children. So the God concealed it from him. Now, why did he want to reveal it? Because he wanted to give them the hope that it's going to come to a certain point. And the Rebbe asked there, it's a very dramatic sikha. He says, 1 second. We see in the end that the Geula has not come still, even till this very year. So is that what Yaakov was going to reveal to them? That the Geula is not coming till Tov Shemem Gimel? That would be a consolation for them. So the Rebbe talks there because Yaakov was feeling that the Geula would come a lot earlier. But that's not the main point I want to speak about. But then he says, so why did God conceal it? Why didn't he let him reveal it to them? Let them have a little hope. So the Rebbe answered, same idea. Because if they had a little hope, they wouldn't do it with their own Aveda. It would be based on that hope. And to have your own Aveda, it has to be completely concealed. Because that drives you to really go seek properly. It's almost, if you read it, it almost sounds like an explanation. I don't want to say an explanation, but a very interesting parallel to the question all the Chassidim ask about Gimel Tammuz. Why did it have to happen? And we don't have an answer. They're having a stroke, and then Gimel Tammuz 26 years ago. Why do we need that? What do we need that concealment for? But it's clear that we don't know why, but when one thing it does, it forces the issue that now you have to show who you are. You know, when you're riding on the Rebbe's coattails and the light is carrying you, it's not really you yet. Now, who are you when the Rebbe is not revealed in a direct way? What will you do? In the words of the Rebbe Shainer Rabbi, you only can cry. Who you are is only possible. If you don't see any solution, if you don't see anything you can rely on. So then the only thing you can do is cry out and come straight from your sincere and depth of your heart. So those are the things I just wanted to throw into the equation here in this discussion. And then I'm ready to continue on here, unless somebody has a question.
Shkoyach, Rabbi, that was amazing. Beautiful.
Thank you. Well, the point was not just to explain, but also to awaken something within us all. And it's an interesting, very interesting way to look at things, because usually it's the concealment and the questions we have regarding that really weakens us. Many people say, if I only had an answer, if I only knew why some people suffer, it'd make it easier. If God just revealed himself to me. And here, it's actually the opposite, that the more of the concealment, the more it's going to be you really sincerely seeking, because there won't be any crutch to lie on and depend upon. So it's a very Chassidus way of turning the whole discussion of human suffering and all the challenges in the opposite direction.
So now with your explanation, does that ruin it for us? Now we can't be at that level because we now know there is an explanation for it.
No, the explanation is that you have to cry with an emes. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
but,
So
if
that
we
was-
know, but if we
If
know
that's
the
good
real
enough, if
deep
that
reason,
satisfies you.
yeah.
That was my question, Rabbi. I don't want to distract from the Ayin Beis, but it seems like there aren't enough Yidden shrine out. Like, I also partake in the Misnagdic world. I daven at two shuls, and I'll make an observation from the Litvisher world. And let's say modern Orthodoxy. I won't speak for
You
black
can
hats
talk
in the-
about the Chabad world too. We're also not crying with an emes. Trust me.
And the Indian here is, and frankly, it's one of the issues of the whatever tension may remain between the Misnagdic and Hasidic world. But the thing is, of course, we believe that belief in the Gula and the Bias Mashiach is one of the Rambam's 13 principles. But I'm saying, from my personal experience over many years in the Misnagdic community, it just gets passing reference. That's not in that people's hearts or minds or souls. Maybe it comes up in a heartfelt vort, or maybe it comes up on an important yontif.
Let me respond to both questions. Or comment on it. Both comments. First of all, I didn't speak about the option because I didn't want to speak about the negative option, which is this: that the darkness is so dark that we forget to look for God. There's also that element. Who was it that said? Was it the Chafetz Chaim or someone else that said that God should send Mashiach, because if he doesn't send them very quickly, people will forget and they won't even expect him anymore. They won't wait for him anymore. So I was talking about two things: that the concealment is so deep that but at the same time, you're talking about the Rebbe who knows Chassidus and knows about Elikus. If a person who has become so accustomed to the darkness of this world, and they think it's normal, Haster, Aster, that the Hester, the concealment, conceals the concealment. Story of Rabbi Hillel Paritcher once. They once went down in the olden days, there were no air conditioning, but the summers were very, very intense, very hot. So the only relief you had was to go into a basement, into a cellar, where there was a little cooler. So he went into a basement just to cool off a bit, but there was also no electricity. So it was dark, it was pitch black. And when the Rabbi Hillel came downstairs, he said, "It's so dark." And one of the people who was there, and they were there for a while because they were cooling off, said, "Don't worry, stay a little longer and you'll get used to it." So he said, that's exactly what I'm worried about, getting used to it. The problem with the world that we live in is that, and I include everybody, all of us, not just Chassidim, non-Chassidim, that God did a very good job. Like when the Rebbe said, Tu B'Shvat, what do you want from the child? The complaint should be to God. You concealed yourself too well. And so the world has become complacent. And we convinced that this reality is our lives. And yes, if we make a little more money and we have a little more comforts, pretty good. What do we need anything else for? That, I wasn't even discussing that option because I was talking about the Rebbe Sich. But somebody who does recognize this is a concealment, it's critical. Because if you don't think it's a concealment, not only are you not going to seek, you're actually going to be quite happy. So the first thing is you need to know it's a concealment. Then you ask the question, but why? Why does God have to conceal? The Rebbe was crying. He looks around at the world, including 770, including his own community, and says, you're learning Chassidus, and people, what do you need this? How much more do you want in this goals?
So the Rebbe, who's recognizing both parts, that there is a concealment and at the same time can't explain it, says the only reason is in order to cry with anemis. So just because we heard the sikha does not suddenly mean we have an explanation. I think our problem is not that we have an explanation. Our problem is that we're apathetic. Even after hearing that, we say, okay, the Rebbe feels that. Maybe I'll cry because the Rebbe cried. That's Chassidim can do, because they feel for the Rebbe. But the fact, I think the concern is not that we have an explanation, that we still don't really feel the concealment. So I think that's the key to that sikha, that you have to understand that Tzimtzum Harishon is a very effective tool. We don't feel there's a Tzimtzum. It's when you learn Chassidus, you start learning about a higher reality. Look, Malchus senses there's something more. That's why it's longing. But you need something to cause you to sense that. It's very easy to become very comfortable in this world and not even say, what Tzimtzum? Who says there's a concealment? I mean, I deal with people all the time. People say, what concealment? My life is quite good. You know? And yes, and then when life is not so good, okay, fine. Then let's look for something. But that type of consistent awareness that this world as it is right now is a helam v'hester, cheshech kaflam mechupel. Not because there's suffering and traumas and holocausts and God forbid, who knows what. It's because the very fact that existence is shrouded and self-consumed and it does not see its maker, its creator. The machine is not aware of its engineer. The art is not aware of its artist. That alone is why the Rebbe Rashab cried when he was a little child. Why doesn't God reveal himself to me and to us? So there's something to cry about. You have to wait for a particular tragedy to cry. But that's predicated on two things. You're sensitive enough to know there's a concealment. And then the Rebbe adds, and the fact that there's no explanation and there's nothing, no glimmer of hope, so to speak, in the sense of that we can explain why this is happening, that is because it ultimately causes us to cry mitanemes. But we needed the Rebbe to say that. If the Rebbe didn't say that sikha and we didn't learn Chassidus, I don't think we'd be crying altogether. Even with it, look how challenging it is. Did anyone ever lose sleep? You know, somebody that lost 1 minute of sleep after that Hashayna Rabbi sikha, or after we learn about how the Tzimtzum's affect. We are living in even when we know this with our minds, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on. So this is a shtickle farbringen, shtickle learning. It's coming together. But I think it really comes down to me. It's not about the logic of it. Yeah, of course, you can start making all the logic in this. It really comes down to when the Rebbe is crying for the Gula, and we should be, the Shu'asra Kavinu Kol Hayim, it means what are you feeling right now? So firstly, if you're feeling comfortable and you're not really feeling lack, I don't think there's going to be any movement from our end, that is. I'm not talking about Mamayla Lamata. And secondly, once there's movement, then you have the Tzemayim we're talking about here. Then there's something to talk about. We're seeking for something. I don't think it's so easy because when you're comfortable, there's really no motivation, to be honest. It's when you're uncomfortable.
So if we have the Tzemayim, if we feel the lack, then we should be happy.
Like Rabbi Hillel said, he's disturbed if he doesn't want to get used to the darkness. He's not looking to be happy here with us.
If you don't mind, I don't think that we live in such an apathetic world. I see just about every day enthusiasm, tremendously organized campaigns for mitzvahs to reach people. I see people working very hard, very dedicated. The shluchim I know work very hard. Their crying probably is expressed in hard work and simcha and dedication. So I beg to disagree. I'm not arguing on what the Rebbe
anyway,
said.
I was talking about myself. I wasn't talking about that.
And I'm not arguing.
Hold on, I was talking about myself, not about them.
Let me finish.
1 second.
No, let me finish.
I was talking about myself, not about them.
Fine, but there are many, many people who are tremendously enthusiastic, hardworking, dedicated.
Anyway, I was talking about myself, not about them. And
Very
I believe when it comes to Chassidus, the key is to look at yourself. I have to look at what I have to do. God bless them all.
Rabbi
God bless them
Jacobson,
all.
we see that you are a highly dedicated, hardworking person. You probably could improve. I could also improve, but I think that overall, we are really working hard. I don't think people there, and I don't think that this world that we live in permits somebody to be apathetic for too long because
I am, if
don't
you,
have
if you know,
apathetic lives.
as I said, God bless
when-
everyone who has the Ratzei and the Tzemoyin, and that's all I have to say. And everybody has to look at themselves
right.
and figure out where they stand.
But very often you
That's
can
all I
look
would say
around
about
and
this.
you can look around, you'll see the other people.
Did
are
you hear what
really-
I just said?
Yes, and I'm responding to it. And I think you can look around and see other people. And like they say, what you see in the other person, you see in yourself. So if you look around and see all the people are doing so much good, and so we can find that in ourselves also. And that we certainly could improve. But I think overall, these Hasidim.
So you're ready to say you can stand in front of the Rebbe and say 30 years from Chav Ches Sivan, we did everything we can. Is that you're saying ready to say that?
I wouldn't go. I'm slightest bit of interest in responding to that, thinking about anything about it. We all try to do our best. Stand in front of the Rebbe.
But the result of what you're saying.
That's an interesting.
Well, with all due respect, okay, you said what you have to say. Let me say what I have to say. Okay, you said what you had to say. I want to now respond. My response is as simple as this. The result of what you said is a very beautiful Ahavas Yisrael and Limud Zchus, the merit of Jewish people, which is a great virtue. However, my thinking is the following. I feel accountability and responsibility to the words of the Rebbe, where he said, do everything you can and bring the Geula. The Geula is not here right now. So I commend all the efforts, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But from my point of view, it's not motivating to hear that everybody's doing everything, because then what do you do next? Then basically the only two options, that either the Rebbe was mistaken, God forbid, because we did do everything, or we're busy patting ourselves on the back that we're doing everything. So I come from a point of view that I look at, you know what? We didn't do everything, and that's why the Geula is not here. And my question is to myself, and if you wish to you as well, what are we going to do today and tomorrow? So it's nice to pat ourselves and to acknowledge the good things people are doing and the commitments. I don't deny that. There are people who give their lives for the Rebbe, for Chassidus, for Torah and Yiddishkeit and so on. But where I'm coming from is what I was trained by the Rebbe, that with all the acknowledgement of good things, is we still need to bring home the Geula and cross the finish line. And we need to be motivated to do that. And we need to cry with an emes. And to do that, you have to really recognize how deep the concealment is. That's where I'm coming from. So it's not a contradiction.
That's very nice. That's very good. But it could be that as I heard Sunday night, that what's the whole Ayin? It's we are servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't know why he didn't bring the Geula. We certainly don't understand, but that doesn't mean that you can't call people apathetic for that reason.
Do you have a game plan? One second. Do you have a game plan for today and tomorrow? What you're going to do about this? Or
I just want to point out what
I asked you a question.
I'm responding. Rabbi Groner told us that when people came after that Hafez Stephen, what did the Rebbe tell people who wrote in? He told us this twice. First time he said it calmly, and then we said, yeah. He said he insisted. The Rebbe said people, should be busy.
I know. I'm asking. So does 30 years since Chavches Sivan Nissen bother you at all? Or you know what? Another 30 years can pass as well.
Is that part of the equation, or the part of the equation is that people are not apathetic? They're doing their best.
I don't know. In business, if I was hired to do a job, and 30 years later I didn't get the job done, I would assume they'd fire me.
Yeah, This is a 5,781-year job.
Okay, fine.
There
Let's
have been
continue
many-
learning. Enough said. I said what I had to say. You said,
I don't
let's
think we
continue.
Call people apathetic.
Anyway,
Someone
I want to
could grow.
continue learning that. Listen, I'm the teacher
Yeah,
here.
good,
Let's
good, but
continue learning. For bring
I don't
another
think-
time.
I don't think it's fair to call people apathetic, and I won't say any more. Okay, very good.
So we continue now, line 2 in the last paragraph on page 1196, where it continues now after saying that we have to have a nefesh adam lamata b'tfilah to take of harotziv atzmoim b'chinas cheles ava. So he's going to explain that now. U'kamesha kosav cholu pnei kel. Cholu pnei kel. What's the meaning of cholu? The pirush choluna, huloshin cheli, comes from the word of illness. What's the pashta taich in the pasuk? Cholu pnei kel. Not sure. Cholu means vayichal, like he waits. Anyway, says choluna, huloshin cheli. It comes from the expression of cheli, of illness, sickness.
Chalu is in Slichas, we're saying it. Chalu no pnei kel. Beg from your bottom of your heart. It's like choile.
Okay, so he's teaching. Where you say chalu pnei kel? Pnei kel is referring to the Eibishter. No, it's beg.
You should
God.
beg Hashem. You should beg Hashem.
Yeah. Okay, it's interesting. He uses the word na only in the second part. Pirush chalu na, huloshen cheli. So it's not just begging; it's begging with a like literally, like you feel infected with it, aching. So the pasuk says, "Vayechal Meisha Pasha Kesisa Yud Gimel Midas Harachim Vayechal Meisha She'achzahu Cheli Shalatzomis."
Perfect for ear.
Excuse me.
Chayli shel atzmus. I think.
I said it's perfect for ear. Hashem Rufecha.
You say, I think Atzomis here he means bones, no?
I think atzmus. No.
No, this is a medrash. I think it's Chedusha that his whole bone, that Vayechal Meisha, that a illness, like so-called his whole skeleton, his whole bone structure, caught an illness. That's what it sounds like to me.
That was Becheto Egel when Hashem told him he wants Chas v'Shalom to destroy it. Vayechal Moshe es pnei Hashem v'yikol.
Right. So he's teaching. So the medrash says that his whole being became sick, his whole body, his bones. That's what I think it says there. Medrash would not use atzmus as atzmus ein sof. It means atzomis as in bones.
Maybe.
Anyway, I'll look it up, but I'm almost sure that's what it is. So basically, we're talking here about a form of aching that is consuming the individual. Okay, who, and he explains, who sha'al yidei ha'izbanus be'aflos erein sof baruch hu. And that's through the contemplation of the grandeur and the wonder of the infinite divine. Eichshu mamalaklam the save of kalalman. How the Eibishter fills existence and is also beyond existence. The Malakalam, the immanent energy within existence, the transcendent energy beyond existence. And furthermore, Ve'ech, She'atzmus Erein Sof Baruch Hu. Eina begeder mamala v'lei begeder seviv, like we learned. That Atzmus Ein Sof is not begeder, it's not even in the realm of mamala, of filling or permeating existence, and not geder seviv, and not in the realm of even being beyond existence. It's beyond, as we learned. V'kula kamei kaloch hashivi mamish, and everything before him is literally mamish, kiloi, like nothing, all null and void. That's how distant, that's how beyond God is, atzmus. So through this contemplation, what happens? When a person contemplates, arichus is bonus, a lengthy, a prolonged contemplation on these matters, not a quick thought, but you really focus on realizing that all of existence, Mamala Kalam, and even Sev Kalam, which is beyond, is all null and void before Atzmus. Bahamokas Hadas, with the intensity, or with the, you can say the immersion, Hamoka Emek, the depth, complete concentration of Das. This sounds very, very familiar. If you remember when he spoke about Das, I just want to refer you to the pages. He spoke about Das in a very strong way. This goes back, where was that? Beginning of the Maimer. Where was it? He spoke about Das. Which Maimer was it?
Rabbi Simon, Rabbi Eliezer הגודל אומר מלמד שאומר משה בתפילו לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא עד שאחזתו אכילו. מהי אכילו? אומר רבי אלעזר אש של הצומס. He davened so much until he became shaken. Ash shel atzomis, his bones were in a fire.
Yeah, the bones. Yeah. But remember, he uses now the word atzmus. So atzomis and medrash, al pi Chassidus, could be meaning that it's touched. The atzmus is touching it. So I just want to say, yeah. So good. You're looking where in Medrash Rabbah Shmesh Rabbah?
This is in Maseches Brachos Daf Lamed Beis. It's Medrash, maybe Medrash Rabbah.
No, you're saying Gemara. Fine, that's good. Anyway, I just want to refer you to, where's this whole piece on Das? Very deep piece on Das. Oh, yeah, the bottom of page 1175 and 1176. So he spoke a lot about the Hamoka of Das, the Hargosha, the Hasaga, the Hakara, Al Kapanim. So he's now talking about the contemplation. How do you, as one, come to such a yearning and longing to the point of chayli, that he's literally aching through and through? The V'yachal Moshe and the Chalu No Pnei Kel. So he's saying, so when a person contemplates with an arichas, a extended contemplation, ba'amokas hadas, with full concentration and depth, what does that cause? Nasa takif at semoyin, that causes there should be the takif, the intense thirst, li'icholel ba'atzmus erein sof, to be encompassed and absorbed in this atzmus erein sof. Because when you appreciate what it's like, that's the ultimate reality. Why would you want to have a inferior reality? So that would cause this deep thirst to be encompassed. Ukamoisha Kosev, the famous pasuk that the Alter Rebbe used, Mili b'shamayim v'im chalecha fatzti ba'aretz. In other words, like he says, he wants to have, ich will nicht, it doesn't bring the Alter Rebbe's lashon, but that's the meaning in this pasuk, because the pashut meaning doesn't necessarily relate to the deeper meaning. That I'm not looking for you in heaven, and ba'aretz, I want imcha, I want nothing but you alone.
I don't want even the imcha, I want you.
Right.
Could you touch the pshat there? Could you touch the pshat of that? Mili b'shamayim? I don't understand that.
Well, the simple interpretation is, I forgot what the simple interpretation is, to be honest. But I know the Alter Rebbe is.
The simple is I want to.
The Rebbe actually brings the simple. And what is the simple?
But the way that the Rabbi is explaining.
The Alter Rebbe. But what's the pasuk to teach Mili b'shamayim?
Who I have b'shamayim, who I have ba'aretz, all the great things. I want only you. Imcho. I don't want all that.
You don't want Deloya. I mean, you don't want his manipulation.
Hold on. Like, 1 second. You're telling me the Alter Rebbe's taich or the Pashut taich?
No, the Pashut taich, the way that I understand is that everything that I have in Bashamayim, physical joy and spiritual joy and physical joy in this world, all of this is not important to me. Important to me is only you.
So how's the Alter Rebbe's taich different than that?
The Rebbe said about Darges, Oirin Sov.
Okay, but it's the same teichen. The Alter Rebbe said the following. Mili b'shamayim v'im kol echafaz libaris. He said like this. Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden atachten, dein Gan Eden elyon, dein Elam haba. Ich will nur du allein, dich allein. Imcha. Lo chafatzti anything but imcha, basically.
No. Imcha, lo chafatzi imcha also. Imcha means which is with you. I don't want the imcha also. I want dich allein.
You sure?
I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah, positive.
Where is that? Where is that pasuk from?
It's a Likutei Torah from this week.
No, not Likutei Torah. Where's
No, the Alter Rebbe
It's
says
in
it.
Tehillim Perek Ayin Gimel.
Ayin
Yeah,
Gimel?
Yeah,
Right.
Pasuk Chaf Hei.
Ayin Gimel, and then there's Ayin
Pasuk
Vav,
Chaf Hei.
Kiyim Chapakor Hayim, and in this week's
I just posted it.
This is getting very confusing. Let's stop for a second. One second.
Okay.
The taich of the Alter Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek brings in Sheresh Mitzvah Tefillah on this pasuk. The Alter Rebbe said, "Mili b'shamayim, v'imcha lechafas sibar." I have to look it up to see the exact way he taich it, but there's no question the Alter Rebbe is basically negating. He doesn't want any giluyim, not shamayim, not the highest levels. He wants only God Himself, Atzmus. But Pashtus, that's the Rebbe Rashab is not bringing the Alter Rebbe, but he is bringing this pasuk to prove, or as a support to the idea that the contemplation that everything, including save mamala and save of the highest levels, is all nullified before Atzmus, and therefore you want to be encompassed in Atzmus.
Rashi is explaining the pshat. Mili b'shomayim shum malach shebocharti li le'eloka. I'm not choosing any malach. Lo yibocharti elo oischa.
Okay. And what about im l'chalecha fatzti ba'aretz? How does he tie the second half?
I don't know if Rashi is saying something about that.
Okay. I'll tell you the truth. I remember a sikha from the Rebbe where he speaks about the Pashut interpretation and explains that difference between that and the Alter Rebbe's, and I don't remember right now, to be honest. Here, it could be the Pashut taich is also enough to just say that I want only you, which
The
is
Radak
above
is
all the levels.
explaining the positive side. The Radak. There are people that are believing the Shemesh or the Echad HaKochavim. Ani en li chayfetz elo becho levad. I don't have a partner. Loi b'shamayim u'b'loi ba'oretz. Ba'oretz.
Oh, got it. Okay. So it's like saying mili b'shamayim u'ba'oretz, the imcha lo chafasi, like that. Okay. Fine. Well, I'm going to look it up. I'll come back with more once I want to see inside. I don't want to speculate. Anyway, let's continue. The point is clear. But the Rebbe Rashab,
I just want can you explain a little bit more about what Hamakas Hadas is? Or?
So I referred you to page 11. What did I say?
Was talking about the 2 days. Ayin Hey.
What page? Yeah, Aleph Kuf Ayin
76, he said.
The bottom of page 1175 and 1176 talks about more at length this idea. Hamakas Hadas basically means total and in-depth concentration. It's the thing that most people don't do. Let's put it that way. So 2 things are necessary here. We're not talking about a superficial and a surface level concentration. We're talking about arichus is bananus. Arichus means lengthy. It can't be 5 minutes. It should be hours, actually. Or whatever that means, a length. And the second is hamakas hadas, which means a concentration where you really completely internalizing it. Like he explained back there on page 1176, the idea of das is that you personalize. It's not just a theory. It's not just a abstract theory. It's personalized, that it's yours, that you are actually experiencing and recognizing every person on their level.
about how God, Atzmus, is beyond, not just beyond the divine within existence, but beyond Sevav Kalalman too, and really realizing a completely different reality. Now, most of us have not been trained to contemplate and to meditate on this level because it requires real work. I mean, it requires
Das
real
means a
training.
direct connection. That's das compared to Bina, for example. Das means a direct connection with the Eibishter and
I don't know what direct connection means. I know that we're talking about a level of personalizing the ideas that it becomes literally one with you. So therefore, to really appreciate what he's saying, one would need to do it. This is where in Temchet Mimim officially we were supposed to be taught to daven properly, not 20 minutes, that there's contemplation of hours of learning Chassidus. And then when you daven, you really are completely immersed, nothing distracts you, and you're really traveling spiritually and cognitively and emotionally into these deepest levels. So if I was to be the one that leads such a training program, I wouldn't begin reaching for the stars. You start step by step. Rabbi Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, the great, famous mashpia, would ask the bochrim to begin by just taking 3 minutes and focusing completely on the Eibishter and not on anything else. And even that was very difficult. 3 minutes. Try it out. Try 30 seconds. So you need to really work. This is called conditioning of the type of focus that, as I said, we're really not trained and taught to do this. I'd be happy to hear and stand corrected if some of you have reached that level. But generally speaking,
where's he? Oh, yeah.
Okay, that wasn't meant as a joke, actually. But I get it.
I thought Yecheskel was gonna jump in.
Okay, fine. Well, listen, the Rebbe said, "Chavches Nissen, epsimal given, mol gishrim with an emes." If people really cried with an emes, Mashiach would have for sure come. That's the Rebbe's words. So, bottom line is, this requires training. I'm only saying it because to appreciate what he's saying here, you need to be able to understand what's required here. Now, Halavai, our learning here, can inspire us all to daven this way and to contemplate this way. But it's clearly saying, Arichas is bonus, Hamakas Adas is like quality. You really completely immersed in it in the deepest possible way. And that causes this intense thirst to be encompassed in
this kind of bochrim. In Lubavitch, there was a group of bochrim that were davening like that. There was one time a bocher that the Rebbe Rashab came inside, was standing in front of him, and he didn't realize because of his concentration.
So you think we can create something like this today? Okay, no comment. Let's continue. Right. Okay.
By the way,
There are bochrim who do something like that in daven, you know?
Rabbi
I
Jacobson.
see bochrim who sit and think.
Okay, there we go. So we have it here too. Okay.
Is there also there's the Indian of Harchavas Hadas too, no?
We're not here to talk about das.
No,
we're here to talk
just
about the
wanna-
content.
The difference between, let's say, a Hamakas Hadas and Harchavas Hadas.
It's not the subject of this mimer. It's completely tangential. I refer you back on page 1175, 1176 if you want more. But to go there right now, to me, is really going to be very distracting.
Okay.
I just want to the Tehillim translates that the Oil Yosef Yitzhak, the Kahas Tehillim teaches that pasuk is, whom have I in heaven but you? There's only you in heaven anyway, so all I have in heaven is you. And
Yeah,
even
that's the Pashta Taich. That's exactly. Now you remind me. That's the Pashta Taich. It's not the Alter Rebbe's Taich.
Right.
It's almost the opposite of the Alter Rebbe. Yeah.
So whom have I in heaven but you?
Who do I have in heaven but you?
And besides you, besides you, it says here, I'm quoting, besides you, I desire nothing on earth. So even place, in heaven is only God in heaven. So even in heaven, I have nothing but you in heaven. But even on earth, our land, our material world, where there is other things besides you, I only want you. I only want to be with you.
Okay, and then the Alter Rebbe adds a depth to that, what the you is. That the
Right.
you is higher than Shemayim and Oretz and all the levels.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So then they
Yeah.
say in a footnote there, they said that some Tzedek writes that the love expressed in this verse means that one desires nothing but God, not even the highest level of Gan, the Garden of Eden. This was actually expressed by the Alter Rebbe when he said it in the state of Dveikus, I want nothing at all. I don't want your Gan Eden, and I don't want your Olam Haba. I want nothing but you alone.
There you go. That's it. Correct. That's good. Thank you. That's good. You know what? Maybe take a picture of it and put it on the group. Okay. Omnam. Let's just read a few more lines here. Now the Rebbe Rashab does not suffice. He says, Omnam, however, next page, 1197. So even though he just said that you reach the state of thirst, what do you call it? Tzemoyin, to be encompassed in Atzmus. He says, however, the primary inyan of Chelas Ava, of the love sickness toward God, the aching with love yearning toward God, ba de'ariya belakus. So he's now introducing riya. In other words, not just contemplation and amokas hadas, but actual experience of, like when you see something, it becomes so real for you. That de'ariya nasa tshuka yeseda benefesh. By seeing something, that, in other words, as much as you pine and long for something, when you see your beloved, then the yearning, he says, the tshuka becomes a tshuka yeseda benefesh. A stronger longing, a stronger yearning is created in the nefesh when there's a riyah in elikus. Okay, so if you thought that his bandnus was difficult, his bandnus arichus his bandnus, and amokas hadas, now he's taking us even further a trip to riyah. Wow. These are very high levels. What can I tell you? Ukamoi, the einei ha'adam loitis be'ena. So it says, the eyes of a person like this, but do not sate him.
They are not going to be satisfied. Loisis bano are not going to be soveya, satisfied.
That's what I just said. They're not sate. Yeah. I use the word sate. Yeah, but right, correct. The because that which he sees with his eyes, eina masbia umeravet simene. It does not fulfill him, and quench his thirst. Because in truth, that does not fill him up, does not complete him. What's he saying here? 1 second. In other words, when you see something, it creates even a deeper yearning. But the seeing itself does not sate you. That just creates more yearning. So if you were thinking, let's say you want to be connected to something you truly love, to a person you really love. So you don't see them. You're contemplating. They're living now, they're traveling 1,000 miles away. And you think about that person and you say, I'd love to really be with that person. Then you see a picture of that person, or you see that person from a distance. So the seeing is only going to create even more thirst, even more yearning and longing, because seeing is still not connection. You want to be one with that person. You want to be intimate with that person. Here, of course, we're talking about godliness. So the mashal in Shir HaShirim of Ish and Isha, of man and woman, husband and wife, is between Neshamis and Knesset Yisrael and Kodesh Brichu. And it's compared to a physical love, an intimate love. You know, all the expressions there. Yishakenim in the Shikus Piyu, kissing, embracing, intimacy. All the Shir HaShirim. I mean, we're using before we used the pasuk Samchuni Bashishes. So there's a love sickness in this case to God. And when you contemplate, it creates that deep thirst. When you see it, you envision it. What he means really is envisioning it. The thirst is even deeper because seeing does not fill you. If anything, seeing makes you want it more. That's what he's saying here, because it does not mamal. So in other words, someone says you want to be one with your beloved, and seeing that beloved is not enough. I want to be one with them. I mean, the only example we can really give is human intimacy, sacred intimacy between spouses, but it's a mashal for the intimacy between Eden and Hashem. So when Moshe spoke to the Eibishter, Vayechal Moshe on the Har Sinai, all of it intimate language there. You know what ne'adati means? Yud is one of the words we use for intimacy, for marriage. And you see how Moshe speaks to God. Show me your face. You know, it's intimate language. Like it says, panim b'panim. You speak that, obviously, Dibra Torah b'loshen b'nei Adam, Torah is using the language of human beings. It's not physical. It's not to avoid anthropomorphism. But yeah. So you see the language, like we say, misas neshikin, that God took Moshe Rabbeinu through misas neshikin, through kissing him on the lips. Again, it's a mashal, but it means it's all mishalim from intimacy, which really human intimacy evolves from divine intimacy. Das, v'yoda odam eschava. What's the word for das? Intimacy, yediyah. So this is what he's talking about here. A deep connection on that level where we experience God like we experience our beloved. Literally like a lover in that sense. But obviously we're talking here without only Kedusha and the purest and deepest way. So the only mashal we really have is in human love and human intimacy, which evolves from these higher levels. So now he's saying, okay, I'm going to stop here. The third line at the top of page 1197. All this, the Rebbe Rashab is essentially explaining, as only a Rebbe could do, what that deep yearning and longing and Rotzeh and Samoyan is, and how one achieves that, which is what the Chayla Ava of Malchus, how it reflects and expresses itself in the Nefesh HaAdam Lamata. We will discuss, after we finish this topic, how we can apply this, each of us, to our lives, because clearly these are levels that are quite difficult to access, but still, learning about it, we have to say there's something in some microcosmic way, some subtle way, that we can also experience. So, but before I go to the application, I'd rather first learn the full subject. And at this point, I would just say we have to absorb. Don't try to understand more than necessary. Absorb this way of Rebbe Rashab communicating how one bonds with and communes with and is intimate with God. That's really what this is, in simple English.
The Rebbe is saying, the Rebbe Rashab, Ikar inyan choilas ahavo bo al yedei hare'io belakus.
So in other words, the more you see, the more you ache, basically.
So
right.
Is the Re'iyah a result of Avodah, or is that Avodah itself?
Maybe both. Maybe both. In other words, when a person is contemplating, then they come to the state of envisioning. Contemplation, even Arichas Isbonus and Amokas Adas, is still not envisioning it. The next level is envisioning it. So it is Avodah, and a result of Avodah, it's both. And that's called envisioning godliness to that extent that you're literally aching for it. Now, the fact that the Rebbe Rashab puts it in a mimer for us means we have to be capable, some extent, to achieve such a level. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to stop here, top of page 1197. Any